Can you imagine feeding 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes? Impossible. But that's what a miracle is all about, doing the impossible. Jamie Buckingham is standing near the Sea of Galilee at the very spot where Jesus did just that, the miracle of multiplication.
Standing here overlooking the beautiful Sea of Galilee, I'm more convinced than ever that the majesty and power of God's miracles is not just for yesterday, it's for today. That power still exists. Jesus Christ is the same today as he was yesterday. He came to convince us that God is a God of miracles. One of the most exciting of Jesus' miracles took place in this field where he fed 5,000 people, using only a boy's lunch as his source. Above me is the traditional Mount of Beatitudes, where Jesus pulled his disciples aside and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." This was a favorite place of Jesus. He came here many times. It was here he came late one afternoon, trying to escape the mobs of people who were thronging after him. They wanted to see his miracles. Many of them were desperate to receive one. It was mid-April, the time of the Jewish Passover. Many people in this densely settled region of Galilee were making their annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The dusty roads were filled with people who were walking and carrying their kofinos, or baskets, the ancient version of a Jewish suitcase or briefcase or pocketbook. Jesus had been teaching around the northern shore of the lake when the word came that his cousin, John the Baptist, has just been executed by King Herod. Jesus knew that Herod's men, and maybe the Roman guards, were going to be after them. He knew that his time had not yet come to be crucified. So he got in a boat with his fishermen friends and headed for this place. He needed to be alone. The crowd, however, which had now swollen to more than 5,000 people, raced him around the edge of the lake. They knew where he was heading, and many of them got there first. That's how eager they were to be with Jesus. It was almost sundown when Jesus arrived, and seeing the crowd waiting for him, he could have told his disciples to set sail for the other side of the lake. Instead, he came ashore and began laying hands on those who were sick. A number of others had joined the mob. They'd come out from nearby Bethsaida. It was a critical time in the life of Jesus. He knew the crowds, hearing of John's death, would turn to him looking for a deliverer. They would try to cast him in the role of a militant Messiah. The nation was on the brink of revolution against the Romans. In fact, within eyesight of where I'm standing right now is Mount Arbel, towering over the western shore of the Sea of Galilee above Tiberias. On the northern cliffs of the mountain, seen from below but virtually inaccessible, are the fascinating caves, fortresses, of a militant group called the Zealots, or Zealots, as the Hebrews would say. In fact, one of Jesus' disciples, Simon the Zealot, had belonged to this group of highly militant Jews. Early yesterday morning, a small group of us scaled that mountain, coming down the side so that we could see the sunrise over the Sea of Galilee. It was easy to imagine the Zealots watching the Roman troops on the roads below as they planned their military strategy. After the fall of Jerusalem, the Zealots made a final stand against the Romans at a lonely mountain top in the Negev desert called Masada. All died. Knowing the spirit of the Zealots was strong in the Galilean area, Jesus felt it was wise to withdraw, knowing of John's execution. He had not come as a military deliverer, as the Jews believed the Messiah would be, but as a suffering servant. Jesus needed to withdraw until the clamor died down. But how could he turn his back on people who were both hungry in spirit and in body? A number of my friends have gathered on the hillside. They too are hungry. Let's go over and join them while they eat. Jesus had been feeding these spiritually hungry people God's bread. But he knew that physical hunger was just as real as spiritual hunger. And seeing the huge crowd, which numbered 5,000 men, not to mention the children, and the women, which meant it could be 15,000. Jesus did an astonishing thing. He turned to Philip, one of his disciples, and asked, where should we buy bread for these people to eat? Why Philip? Well, Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from nearby Bethsaida. And since this was their hometown, it would be natural to ask, hey, where's the local supermarket? Jesus was having a good time with Philip. He knew that Philip was a practical man. Had he lived today, he probably would have been an engineer or a CPA or an accountant. He quickly calculated a few things in his mind, and he said, 5,000 people? We can't feed 5,000 people, and the natural laws won't allow it. Anyway, they're not our responsibility. If they were foolish enough to get out here on the road and to sit in the rain, let them suffer a little bit. Jesus looked at Philip, and he said, you're a negative fellow, Philip. Whose responsibility was it? Well, it goes back to another question that Cain asked God after killing his brother. Am I my brother's keeper? Jesus, in this miracle, answered that question. No, you're not your brother's keeper. You're your brother's brother. And when your brother is hungry, you feed him. Jesus hadn't invited these people. In fact, he had tried to escape them. They knew it was near sundown and that this was a desolate section and that there wasn't any food available. Let every man fend for himself. That's the natural law. Jesus, though, saw people with the eyes of God, and it was time for a miracle. Overhearing Jesus asking Philip how they were going to feed this crowd, a little kid who had come out from Bethsaida to see the miracle worker stepped up to Andrew. Remember, Andrew was from Bethsaida, and he said, Mr. Andrew, I ain't got much, but if it'll help, you can give it to Jesus. Andrew looked down, and the little kid was holding up his picnic lunch, 5 little loaves and 2 tiny pickled fish. Andrew had no choice but to take the little boy and his lunch to Jesus. Well, it was all Jesus needed. While Philip had no faith at all, Andrew's wasn't much more, not much bigger than a grain of mustard seed, but that's all that Jesus ever expects is mustard seed faith. All it takes is someone who's willing to say, I'll take a tiny step toward the impossible. You take that step, and immediately God says, I will multiply your tiny step 1,000,000 times. And so the little boy's action illustrates a basic spiritual principle. If you'll take what little bit you have and offer that to God, God will do the multiplication. Then, all you can say is, Lord, I don't believe, but I really want to. But that's a faith statement. At least you're saying, God, you can. And that's what Andrew and his little sidekick were saying. They were offering what they had to Jesus. Then he blessed the food using the ancient Jewish grace used in every home in Israel. Blessed art thou, Jehovah our God, King of the universe, who causest bread to come forth from the earth. The disciples then began passing the food to the people, and something fantastic, incredible happened. The food began to multiply. In fact, it multiplied so much there was enough for everyone. In fact, when the meal was open, they passed among the people and picked up the extra food, and there was enough for every basket. So as you read this story in your Bibles and answer the questions in your notebook, remember what caused this miracle to take place. Starting with Jesus, who feeds the spirit and the body. And then it ended with a little kid who said, take my lunch. It's not much, but you can have it all. God looked upon all those things, and the miracle of multiplication took place. The lesson, there's enough for everyone.